I'm looking forward to my retirement.
Go right ahead.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Public Works Advisory Board meeting on May 12th, 2026. Casey, would you call the meeting to order?
Chair Kelly.
Here.
Vice Chair Herman, if you can hear us.
Here. Yep, can you hear me?
Member Fea.
Here.
And the rest are out, but we have a quorum.
Excellent. Are there any changes to the agendas, any upgrades or anything?
No.
I move that we approve the agenda as written.
Second.
John?
Aye.
Cool. Thank you. The minutes from the April 14th meeting, are there any comments or amendments that need to be made? If there's no comments or amendments, then I move that we approve the minutes as submitted.
Second.
John?
Approve.
Excellent.
We all have our rules.
Casey, is there any visitor communication?
There is not.
Okay, cool. Then we're going to jump right into it. Let's do the board business, the Cascade Avenue safety audit. Good to see you guys in person.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I'll start this off. We have Kittleson and Associates with us today. They were contracted to do our road safety audit. The road safety audit is the first one that we've done in the actual downtown corridor. It was a council goal in 25-26 to look at Cascade Avenue specifically and see what we can do to increase pedestrian safety through that corridor. They did essentially a 3-day condensed audit of the corridor. This is in spring break last week in March, and you two, Lori and Bill, were part of that. We appreciate your involvement with that. We had an Audit staff, a couple people from Kittleson, some downtown business owners, Carrie, Jackson, and myself as far as internal staff as part of that group. I thought it went very well. They did a lot of boots on the ground, watching traffic, watching pedestrians, watching the interactions of the two. Really taking a look at, where are speed issues, where are congestion issues, where are sightline issues, and came back to the working group with their findings and reviewed them with the group, and then essentially came up with solutions for some of those conflicts through the corridor. And with that, the group went away and had a little bit of time to think about it, look at it, and then got a prioritization survey of which everybody filled out the survey to prioritize not only the near term but the long term improvements as well. So with that, I'm going to pass this over to Matt Kittleson with Kittleson and Cameron to run through a presentation, and then any questions, good discussion afterwards.
Great, thanks, Paul. Thanks for the chance to be here. Matt Kittleson with Kittleson and Associates, and Cameron Thompson here with me. We'll walk through the nuts and bolts of what we did and why. We also had Hermanus Stein. He and Cameron were here conducting the audit. Hermanus is out of the country now, so he's shared his insight throughout the process and beforehand. So I think Paul did a great overview, so I'll just add to that before we dive into it that the roadway safety audit is a tool that exists. This approach is something that has been conducted many places, and the intention of it, I think, is really well suited for what the city was trying to do in this particular case, which was let's focus on a really specific area of town, identify, as Paul was saying, those boots on the ground, observe the conditions during different time of day, different conditions, talk with the people who see it every day, with the intention of really identifying what those solutions can be, really tailored to the particular corridor. It's not a broad citywide plan. It's really focused on this really specific area. So I think the process went really well. The outcomes are exciting to kind of lean into. So I'll turn it to Cameron to walk through the process. And if you have questions along the way, please raise your hand. We'd like this to, as much as we can, be a conversation about what happened and what we do next.
Thank you. Yep. So the presentation here is was our final presentation to the road safety audit team, but it provides a good summary of kind of our observations, and then kind of a toolbox of suggestions to hopefully mitigate some safety issues. But overall, in this presentation, we can go through some of this fairly quickly, as a lot of you were already part of this. We're kind of going over, reminding you what steps we did during this process. But mainly, we'll be going through stakeholder input and field observations. So from during that RSA 3-day kind of process, and then really going through and looking at some preliminary findings and suggestions there. Went over kind of that RSA general overview of what it is, but we're kind of more in step 7, 8 now as part of this process. Then just a reminder of those 3 days in spring break in late March, but had kind of a startup meeting, getting everyone's thoughts and ideas before we actually went out and did field observations. Then did field observations in the afternoon, nighttime, and then morning, and then kind of refining those our thoughts Thursday afternoon and then Friday as well. Looking at the actual corridor extents that we really took a look at is Cascade Avenue from Pine Street to Jefferson Avenue. So this is where we're really focusing our kind of observations and then suggestions. As part of the process, before we actually kind of started the whole 3-day RSA process, we took a look at the city's transportation system plan, looking at planned projects, looking at previous projects that had already been built, most notably the streetscape project through downtown, and then also compiled crash data, and we took the most recent available 10 years of data, so that's from 2015 to 2024. So that doesn't include 2025 or any 2026 crashes in the data. And then as kind of part of the, you'll see later in this presentation, we'll bring up this US 20 alternate route a few times. And that's really kind of focusing on freight traffic, seeing if we can get them shifted away from the downtown core area and use Barclay and then Locust as that freight route. Just some general reminders of crash trends that we saw. There were a total of 71 crashes in this 10-year data set in our kind of study corridor. 75% of those crashes were at intersections. And you can see below in the map generally where those are. And then we also circled where pedestrian and bicyclist crashes occurred. And then the dash circle is where that most recent pedestrian fatality occurred. So it's not, that fatality isn't included in the data because it wasn't available in the summary, but we did want to note that that's the location of that. Just some general kind of trends here. Don't want to go too deep into the crash data, but about half of the crashes resulted in injuries. There were 0 crashes in this 10 years of data that resulted in a fatality. And then 7 total crashes involved a pedestrian or bicyclist, with all of those as part of the injury crashes. Most crashes occurred during kind of typical daytime, 11 to 6 p.m. At 72%. 34% of the crashes occurred in August and September. So kind of late summer was where most of the crashes occurred. And then about half of the crashes were rear end crashes. Now we'll get into some of our field observations when we were out there for those kind of afternoon, nighttime, and then morning periods. The first section that we summarized was pedestrian safety, looking at kind of how pedestrians are getting around downtown. First, looking at the crosswalks. As you can see on the right, there are some areas where poles or other or like a car or something could be blocking a pedestrian waiting to cross. And then just looking at yielding behavior. Generally, what we saw was during those peak periods where everyone's kind of backed up in traffic, yielding was pretty easily occurred. But those kind of nighttime or morning where vehicles are driving a little faster occurred a little less. And then one of the biggest things we saw is mid-block crossings. Lots of people parking and then walking across Cascade Avenue, not at a crosswalk. In our observations, this mostly occurred across from the Sisters Bakery, but in some of the stakeholder input, definitely mentioned that occurring throughout the corridor pretty commonly.
We'll just note on the time of day stuff. So Cameron mentioned the periods that observations were done, and the intention of that is one, just daylight conditions. It's different, shadows are different. But then as he's describing the way, obviously you guys know this because you live it, but the speeds that vehicles travel, the congestion actually can create yielding opportunities because people just let people in. So that's the kind of stuff we wanted to see and document through this process. It's not just one time a day doesn't say everything about the conditions, especially with crash potential. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Moving forward, looking at kind of general speeding was a pretty big stakeholder input point that was brought up. And we mostly noticed this on the approaches to downtown. So as you're coming from kind of that 55-mile-an-hour highway zone and getting into this kind of step down speed limit down to 20, and really looking at kind of coming westbound on 20, you're kind of hitting that merge of 126, and then eastbound after the Barclay roundabout, where people kind of accelerate back up to speed and then have to come back down as they're coming into downtown. Through the actual core area and congested times, speeding is not really apparent as everyone is kind of bumper-to-bumper traffic through town, but definitely people following very closely, kind of just trying to get through. And then off-peak, so that's kind of those mornings and nighttime where the street's pretty open, not a lot of cars parked on the sides, not a lot of businesses open, so people aren't walking around as much. Definitely more speeding through that downtown area at that point, as it's just a flat, straight section of road. Focused a lot on kind of how drivers are getting through town and around town. Noticed a lot of people just moving, trying to get through downtown Sisters, generally as quickly as possible. A lot of people with trailers and things as well. And then just a lot of kind of things going on in your vision as you're driving. People stop trying to take a left through that kind of bumper-to-bumper traffic, a lot of pedestrians crossing, people trying to get out from the side streets. Just generally a lot going on. Some intersection and visibility, crossing visibility items here. On the bottom right, you see a photo of the curb extensions, not actually extending past a parked vehicle, so that can block sight distances for drivers coming up on that crosswalk to be able to see a pedestrian. And then lighting, there's decorative lighting there today, but it doesn't really reach the pedestrians crossing the street so that they're more visible to the drivers.
Paul, the work that ODOT's doing right now in Cascade, are they extending those bump outs further, or is it just going to be the same location of that?
In some areas they are, actually at Pine Street quite a bit. Right out here at Cascade they did at large. But in the downtown, the primary 6 intersections is going to be roughly about the same.
Then we looked at kind of how do you, what opportunities do you have for some mitigation strategies for a lot of these things we've seen and heard about. So kind of the next section of the presentation is really what the memo in the agenda is summarizing or suggested kind of opportunities. And this is a toolbox, so they don't all need to happen. You can kind of pick and choose depending on what you want to try to address. And then another kind of important point that I mentioned at the start is that a lot of these are dependent on freight traffic being moved away from the downtown core. There are a lot of requirements to a road that freight traffic is on. So some of these opportunities may not be feasible at this time, but may be feasible further down the line.
US 20 is a reduction review route for ODOT, so there's just broad influence and that the great community has with the design of that road.
So starting with approaches, we looked at first the approach from the west. So if you're also looking at the memo, some of these will be shown in those figures. The first 3 figures are really summarizing near-term opportunities. What we'll show in the PowerPoint is a combination of everything, so near-term and long-term. So it is a little bit different format, but show generally the same.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
So I'm wondering, well, Bill and I've seen this, and then after we were involved, there was a poll that was put out to gauge, I guess, people. I'm interested in how, was that of any use? Did that provide anything towards the recommendations and the prioritization, or did everybody have different things they liked best? Or?
So at least the memo in the agenda was before I think the survey went out. But then for kind of deciding which of these options the city would like to move forward with, it's kind of where that survey came in.
So it was of use, and that relates to the priorities that were listed?
Certainly allowed the options to nothing real clear.
I wondered.
But provides us some information.
Okay, thanks.
So getting started on the first suggestions, so from the west, as you're coming into downtown Sisters, so after the Barclay roundabout, as you're coming around that curve, first is just doubling up the speed limit sign, so the speed 20 there, putting one on the other side of the street where the yellow box is, providing that just kind of more opportunities for a driver to see that 20 and react to it. In-lane speed reduction pavement markings, so that's the figure at the bottom, is those dashed white lines that get spaced closer and closer together as you kind of get towards that area where you'd like people to slow down. And then a speed feedback sign somewhere along this curve, so people kind of have that visual reaction to how fast they're actually going. Continuing, kind of approaching from the west, this will be a much longer term option, but is a mini roundabout at Pine Street. So that's the thought behind this, is as you are coming from the west, you hit the Barclay roundabout, that slows you down, but then you don't have anything physically making you slow down before you get into this downtown core. So it's the option here. Currently, just a concept sketch, just to see if it was feasible. And this would be a smaller roundabout than kind of the two you have in town currently, but would definitely require that kind of freight collaboration. Then looking, approaching from the east, this is a project in the TSP, but adding that roundabout at the intersection of 126 and US 20. This would allow us to remove that merge. That kind of complicates that entry into town and creates that continuous kind of, you slow down now at the 126 intersection, and then you'll get that reminder at the Locust Street intersection as well. If the roundabout doesn't, or before the roundabout would be able to be built, you could address some things similar to the west side, doubling up those 20-mile-an-hour speed limit signs, get them more visible, especially during that merge, and then also switching out the current merge sign, which is just a right lane end sign. Was kind of half of that sign essentially, but switching it to this kind of newer zipper merge sign that would hopefully encourage people to merge a little smoother through this section. Then there's a lot going on this sheet, but we'll talk a bit more about a lot of these options further along in this presentation. The biggest one is probably the speed feedback sign after the Locust roundabout. We heard and saw a lot of people accelerating out of that roundabout as they come from that kind of higher speed highway, hit the roundabout to slow down, and then accelerate out of it back up to higher speeds. So trying to keep them continuing at that 20-mile-an-hour speed. And then I'll move along, but we'll also talk about some possible buffered bike lanes, lighting, raised intersections, and then just some bike wayfinding signs. Then also kind of approaching each side, a couple options for warning drivers of pedestrian crossings. We didn't want to put pedestrian crossing signs or RFBs at every crosswalk through the downtown core, as that would get very cluttered. So we figured putting them at the beginning of the corridor and warning people that there are pedestrians that will be crossing the road over the next about 2,000 feet.
I did have a question. Can you go back to one slide? Yeah. On the east side, the RRFB, either coming out of or going, well, I guess mostly the coming out of the curve to get there. Is that an issue for design right there?
It definitely could be. We need to look a little more on sight distance, but you can also put in, see if my cursor comes up, put in advanced flasher is also an option, but it would be something we would need to look at for design of that.
I think that just the curve in general, for your point, is I think having some advanced warning around the curve would be good for that. You can do those advanced warnings so that people know that they're coming into it. If you do it later, if you do it too soon, you get that effect of people ignoring it as they get downtown. But really, we want to alert them right as they're getting into that core. So I think figuring out a way to make it work in that general vicinity could help address the curve issue.
It's a really complicated location. And I don't know if in a maybe this is already as a final version, but otherwise, like mentioning something about that, about the design criteria you might have to evaluate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found that section of road right there from that roundabout to Arch was really the scariest part of the whole route. Because people are just flying coming in there, so the speed signs, the slow down, the 20-mile-an-hour sign. I think that putting a sign in that section would remind them when they come out of the roundabout what actually is.
Yeah, those are good points. Adding to this kind of approaching the downtown core area, just kind of looking at some sort of sign that I think the city is working on currently or planning on adjusting their kind of welcome to Sisters sign. But just add an example of Prineville's was kind of the biggest, most kind of in your face sign of telling you that you're going into a populated area after you've been.
Said this last time, but I don't know that I think that picture is a good example for this report because you wouldn't build that on this road.
Yeah.
Because of it being a state highway, and if there's another picture you have in your archive somewhere of something that's the idea of a gateway but not a
Yeah, it doesn't go over.
the top.
Yeah.
That just might be nice to slip in there.
Yeah. So then looking more at the corridor, the downtown core area, these would be these kind of spot improvements as they were described, are really trying to continually slow vehicles down as they're moving through the corridor, kind of get those physical reminders to continue moving at kind of the 20-mile-an-hour speed. So our initial thoughts were raised intersections, every other intersection, and that kind of worked out to be raised intersections at Larch and Fir, and then a raised crossing between Oak and Elm, kind of where Ash would connect, and then either that mini roundabout that we brought up earlier, or another raised intersection as well. But just kind of an option that is there would definitely require the freight traffic moving away from this downtown core area, but is an item in the toolbox. And then kind of the bicycle wayfinding signs. I think it was on near Pine Street, where the current route is having eastbound bikes. So as you're coming into town towards Pine Street, pointing them to go left and up to Main Street. So maybe instead pointing them down to Hood Avenue, kind of making it a loop, that's an option. Then we looked at how do we restripe kind of the entire corridor to reduce some of these, some of the lane widths that are there currently. And they're there currently because of the freight traffic moving through downtown. So these would definitely require the collaboration there. But looking at the top cross-section is the current roadway cross-section there with 8-foot parking lanes approximately, and then 14-foot vehicle lanes. And so we have the opportunity to reduce those vehicle lanes, kind of narrow the width there to a more typical 12-foot lane, and then provide a buffer between the parking and those vehicle lanes. This would hopefully reduce speeds with the lane widths, but then also provide space for people to open their doors when they're getting in and out of their cars. That was one safety concern we had heard, is when people park along Cascade Avenue, they have trouble opening their doors when it's that busy or really getting into their vehicles again. And then continuing the striping at intersections. So City of Sisters already has the curb extensions, but looking at how do you further those, kind of extend those without actually having to rebuild them. So adding in a 4-foot buffer would keep the 12-foot lanes through the entire corridor, where we'd get a few extra feet. And then those could be also, or you could also include tubular markers in that buffer area, so vehicles can't just drive straight through that area.
I remember discussing that one. I do think there's points to make along, there's a look to this corridor. And putting a bunch of those out, I think is detracting from the look.
Yeah, definitely conversations that would need to happen on the actual design of these. This next slide kind of shows a sketch of what that could look like for a section. We're just looking at kind of in the middle there, the red would all be that new striping. And then kind of in addition to the kind of bollard conversation, we did notice the current curb extensions do have those white bollards on the left image. I think they're about 2 feet tall, and they could kind of be hid behind parked vehicles, other vehicles driving in front of you. Generally, we're hard to see. But then on the right, the bollard shown there is at the new Locust roundabout. And that one's about 4 feet tall.
Do you know, why is that one red and the other one white? Is that an MUTCD thing?
I think it has to do with, the one's close to the roundabout. I think it's an ODOT design. They use that, the red rock design color quite a bit. You see that on signposts. I think it's just an ODOT.
Because that red one, even though it's 4 feet high, to me that's a lot harder to see than the 2-foot white ones.
Yeah, and I think that the top piece is reflective.
Oh, okay.
But I think it highlights the point that you were making earlier, just like what's that right design feature? You know, is it something that's more traffic oriented? Is it something that's more decorative in nature? But really, the goal is shrink the effective width of the road in a way that's manageable with the overall freight conversation. So there's a lot of design considerations about how you could tackle that. But the question is that the goal to shrink that?
The white ones on the left that are existing in downtown, the only reason they're there is for ODOT maintenance to mark curbs for snow removal.
Okay.
So where you see them, they're right on the apex of a curb.
Yep.
Yep.
That means they never hit the curb, right?
Say that, but when you get a foot of snow, they definitely help.
Yeah.
Yeah. Moving on with some of the possible suggestions, I was looking at lighting, and this could be split into two kind of lighting options. Intersection lighting, so really lighting those crosswalks specifically, and these could be kind of part of the dark sky compliance that I know the city is going through. So updating those fixtures possibly. So just kind of the actual like kind of light that's on the posts and not actually putting in new light posts. So that is an option there. corridor lighting, so more kind of pedestrian scale lighting throughout the whole corridor. As we were walking through, we noticed a lot of the businesses have lighting on their frontages, and so kind of converting that to a city-owned and maintained system where the lights would stay on all night and kind of be dictated by the city there. One of the kind of more out of the box options was removing parking on alternating sides of Cascade Avenue. This was really trying to reduce the amount of mid-block crossings that were occurring of people parking on one side and then running across the other. And so these would be a little more strategic location-wise of thinking about which businesses are on which side of the street and what areas actually have a lot of the mid-block crossings to reduce those. This is one of the options that could be a pilot project, and so it could be just a temporary couple-week installation of putting in maybe some of these kind of barrels shown on the top image there, or some sort of fencing like rope. But something temporary could be an option to test it out and see if it actually helps.
But is the pilot the removing the parking, or is the pilot the making it hard for pedestrians to go across?
It'd be kind of both part of it.
I think removing the parking could be really controversial. I don't know. I have really bad memories of removing parking in other locations.
Yeah, that was kind of one of our biggest.
But I think the parking, I mean, if you were to look at the one example, I think the bakery, and then Spencer himself, who would be the one complaining about it, he knows that's the issue.
Yeah.
They're crossing it. So, he needs to put a camera out there to figure out how many people are crossing. And we need to put it there, and then determine how to.
But I worry that if you take the parking away, suddenly the street's wider and it feels more comfortable to drive faster.
Yeah, you're
This is
definitely.
bad pedestrian behavior, not necessarily bad driver behavior on this one.
Yeah, and I think that's you make a good point of that it would have to be this if this were to be a route that would be explored, you need to do it with some of the other narrowing elements, the striping, the feedback signs. We definitely wouldn't want to just do this in isolation because I think you're right, a wide road can make people feel right faster, but it's trying to manage crossings, help people cross at the right spot. It is a focused issue, and I don't think there would be a scenario where you want to do both of this solve all your problems.
So I wonder if in the final version of this, there might be like a statement to make about that, like these are the things you should consider.
Yeah, I think that'd be good.
Notes to future people doing this.
Yeah, made clear that these things, a package of ideas, need to be considered holistically.
And then kind of our final suggestion also could be a pilot project, but is more of an education campaign to attempt to get people to use the crosswalks instead of crossing at mid-blocks. So one idea was brought up that kind of in businesses trying to figure out a way to encourage people to cross at intersections, and that'd be kind of on the businesses to organize there, but then actually on the street and sidewalk, putting in some sort of messaging, could be on paint on the sidewalk, like telling people to cross at a crosswalk, or like crosswalk is 100 feet away, something like that, or some sort of sign like shown at the bottom here. And these could be outside of entrances, outside of, like at driveways where people would park in some of the parking lots off the street, and then try to walking across just in strategic locations there. But something that could be implemented at a kind of a pilot project style where it's removable, just to see if it actually works. Is kind of the point there for the pilot project. And that's generally all of what we had come up with, but these are kind of generally the national best practices of increasing safety, and a lot of it is important to note the freight route and kind of the local context and feel of the road.
I think you guys captured it. I do. And actually, the near-term suggestions that you put in the memo, those make real sense, and they're like, not as, they're not going to be as burdensome on the city, because they're really just, I mean, I think the speed signs, or the speed,
The feedback ones.
feedback sign, I think those are going to be the most expensive thing on the project, because we get power to get to those. But I think that alerting them coming into the corridor to slow down, putting the lines to squeeze it in at the ends, making sure we notify them people, I think that's going to be a good start to do that. Then we can actually reevaluate that and probably come back and look at some of what our long-term things would be on that. But I mean, the near-term suggestions are relatively easy to do. Says someone who's never painted a street in his life. Okay.
No, you're absolutely correct. We are going ahead with actually proposing dollars in this year's budget to do those near-term improvements.
Good.
How much are we allowed to do versus, or is it working with them and just saying, is it okay for us to do this if we pay for it? Is that how that works?
Yes and yes. They're definitely more receptive if they're not footing the bill, obviously. But anything that we do, whether it's signs, striping, feedback signs, we will have to get ODOT involved and approved. Yeah. Yep.
So I had one more comment. It might be more of a long-term suggestion, and I realize it's a little bit out of the scope of this, which was focused on Cascade, but it was just kind of over time thinking about evaluating the effectiveness of the changes that have been made to direct more people to Berkeley. Because that kind of like next time around when you do this, that will have been in place more. How effective has that been? But I wonder if seeing something in this report about Barclay, that there are improvements going on, there's improvements planned, it'd be great to find some more funding to finish Barclay. Is there a way to use this report to help with that, so that if there's a grant, and as part of the grant application, you can hand them this, and it says in it, by the way, one of the biggest things you can do is be directing certain traffic onto Barclay, and to be able to properly do that, we need a roundabout up there at Camp Polk, and we need these other things for it to actually work well. So I was just thinking about using this as the mechanism, and is there some words that can be put in here that helps do that?
It's a great idea. Makes a lot of sense to us.
Yeah, we could look. There's some stuff I think we could look at it and see the most the clean way to do it. Because I think you could point to the TSP, which identifies a lot of those things already, and like the roundabout at Camp Polk is in there. So we could say we certainly talk about the alternate routes. So there could be a section that we say, and a great way to do this is to prioritize those improvements that are already in the TSP for the alternate route on Barclay and these locations. I think that would be easy to do, and so it wouldn't create a conflict that we'd have to kind of unwind. So yeah, it's a good idea.
So Paul, what's the next steps on this? Are we looking for a recommendation from the board for council? What's our next step?
So today we want to get feedback from you guys. I've been taking notes. Jackson's been taking notes. We've got some great suggestions that we'll go back, work with Kittleson on including in the tech memo, and then we'll take it to council in June, and then hopefully get budget authority to do the near term in July and start that process with ODOT, and hopefully get something in place by, towards the end of summer would be, yeah.
That's good. I think it would be beneficial. And you guys weren't here this last 2 weeks in our town, but it's been a S show with the ODOT stuff. People are crossing everywhere. I mean, it's just a disaster.
Scary.
They've closed off like all the intersections in town at one time on a weekend. And you guys will see in the Nugget this that comes out tomorrow. There's front page articles on how the businesses are getting hammered by the decrease in business going on. So it's a real bad example of how to do a project. But in their defense, it'll be done quick, right?
I know when we were talking to Paul and Jackson about this early on, it was trying to do the audit before all this happened. Maybe that's reinforcing the wisdom of that approach because it's so different. I did have an anecdote coming from a baseball game out at Sisters High School a week or two ago, and it was shocking how much is tore up. Just the whole corridor.
Real shock. But anyway, it's a good example of this mayhem on the streets. You almost have to, driving down the streets, I can't look, I can't.
Driving like this. Good job.
Well, there's downsides to that approach.
Yeah, there is. I'll put that in for.
It just proves how far out of the way people go for their donut and how they'll put themselves at risk. It's just amazing.
It is a good donut.
It's gotta be. Yeah, it's gotta be.
Thank you guys. I think it was nice work. Your team put together something really important for us to go forward with. Make a difference. Long-term suggestions, you want to talk about that?
Sure.
I was more focused really on getting it started and then seeing how the traffic flows on it. The long-term ones, I think that just as a starting one on the Pine and Cascade, the roundabout there, I think that's just going to be a real hard one to do.
The mini roundabout.
I just don't think there's enough space there, and the businesses on those 3 of the 4 corners are going to get hammered by that.
I think that location is worthy of evaluating some unique options, though.
Raised
Something.
crosswalks or flashing crosswalks, because that's so dangerous there. It really is.
Maybe that's a better way to address that is to say this is an important location for the long term. Solutions need to be evaluated more. They might include A, B, C. Just kind of highlighting that's such an important location. It really is for a lot of things happening there. That probably needs more study.
More study on that one. And it would be interesting to see the effect of the short-term ones immediate in the process, see how it affects that intersection over there. And if we can keep people calm in the corridor, and then reminding them that you're not supposed to hit the gas pedal right at Oak Street to get out of town, and that's really, that would be hard to think about that.
Keep calm in the corridor
Keep
campaign.
calm, yeah. Keep calm.
I see T-shirts.
One of the comments in regards to the roadway lighting and the posts that are right next to the road. To be honest with you, I hide behind the posts on purpose so I don't get hit. Because then we peek out to see if there's someone there. So it's almost I use it as a defensive mechanism. Because even the guy's traveling 23 miles an hour, it seems like it's going pretty fast. But
Well, and that's part of the whole look of downtown.
It is.
It's not like you're going to change that. I think it is, like they said, lighting for dark sky, what do you change it to?
Yeah, the lighting, it's a big question. I know it was not casually arrived at last time. There was a project that more pedestrian scale lighting would be the goal, just light more of the crosswalk areas and visibility. Right now, it's really more decorative focused. You know, so I think you don't have to remove a dark sky intent without with. You might have to move away from more decorative and be more focused on function. You know, but there's that'd be more the balance I think we have to work towards. So yeah, it's a big conversation because the look, as has been pointed out, the look is definitely we want to maintain.
We do that all over town, right? We do it at,
Gateway Park.
Gateway Park.
Yeah.
And then it's over up on the new roundabout on Ballard. So it's something that's already, like, citizens are used to.
Adams will have more of that. And then just technology, even with our old-fashioned streetlights on Main and Hood that we're going to be putting in on Adams, they have, you know, really focused LED, adjustable almost, light sources. So you can really put that light and have it maximize, you know, do you want the crosswalk? Do you want the ADA ramp? Do you want the travel lane? You got more control that way.
Oh, there's still this. Cameron mentioned it briefly, but just the who controls when the lights are on. You know, that's a big thing. Just getting those on the public system.
They all go off at 8.
Time for bed, everybody.
Remember one of the feedbacks we got from the Downtown Business Association, flashing lights are RFPs. So there was one of their concerns, they don't want a flashing light in the corridor because it's just nuisance, I guess. But that's one of the things that the business owners have to us.
That way, it's definitely a double-edged sword, if you will. Certainly understand the distractive nature. It's also the reason they're effective at creating yield because it catches people's attention. One thing that they, you know, just to highlight kind of why I think they're effective. A lot of the older lights you see, they just flash continuously. You know, and people see them all the time. It just becomes part of your visual assumption for that area, and you almost ignore it. You know, the flashing light that just is there and ignores. So, if we have a light, I think the intention would be that it would be useful, effective, and only when it's needed. So, how you place them, where you orient them, I think the curve, maybe trying to minimize the way they line up with line of sight for businesses. Those would be maybe management techniques if that's the approach, as opposed to just saying yes or no because they are distracting. We just want to highlight the safety benefit that would provide.
I think that goes to just selecting them at like 2 locations instead of every intersection as well. But it does make me think of an experience I had with RRFBs in the vicinity of a high school. And it really caused a problem with traffic because it was being hit all the time and ended up having to change, I think we had to change it to a hawk.
Oh yeah.
But that might be a point to put in here because I'm thinking of like busy summer weekends, and that thing could be on all the time.
Non-stop.
And those are the same people that are fighting over the flags to walk across.
Yeah. And I don't know what to do about that, but it might be a point to evaluate is how frequently those would be on.
You know, a good example that I've seen recently is Leavenworth, Washington. It's a big highway, much bigger than 20, but similar hawk type application. And it says on the sign that you could wait minutes to cross for that reason because they're managing crossings and traffic flows. So I think it's just a reminder of the need to study it further, you know, about how that impact is managed crossings versus traffic flow. Which, if you have people wait, they will get aggressive when they have the opportunity to move, which can have negative effects. So I think we want to be really careful about that.
Yeah.
And I agree with your comment about flashing does
maybe they're more, I know we've talked a lot about the bar clay, the alternate route. If there's other options for people, maybe you're more tolerant of longer waits if people choose to use the downtown center. Those could be chicken and egg thing a little bit.
What were those crossing lights called? Hogs?
Hawk, like
Hawk.
like a hawk.
Yeah, hawk, I mean, it essentially has a red indication, so it stops traffic, but you can control the timing of it. So if you push it, it would have a recall on it, meaning I push go, but it might wait 20 seconds.
More like a traffic light.
Either crossing.
Got it. Got it.
So it's not just push and go.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's overhead indication. They're a lot more elaborate installations.
Yeah, they're definitely more expensive.
Yeah.
I think we talked about striping in the corridor, just have to be cautious of maintaining our feel of community on that. Yeah, the armor has to be probably at the beginning, end of the corridor, each end of it.
I wouldn't want more than that.
That would probably be the way you have to do it. And they're problem areas. Pine and Cascade should have. That's one that's such a, I think that intersection, like we said, needs more study on those that are going through it.
It'll also be interesting to see what reducing that crossing distance, how that affects that as well.
That's a big light.
It is.
It's going to look, I think, quite a bit different than it did once they pull all the cones and the traffic barriers away. Oh, wow. And maybe pedestrians feel less safe, just like they're sticking out there farther. Yeah,
You put a light pole out there.
right.
Well, I don't have anything else.
Me either.
John still with us?
Oh, I have a laundry list of comments.
Ooh, okay.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm happy.
Do you have anything, John?
No comments. All sounds great. Only comment is that Bill was a little bit quiet on the speaker tonight. Said no one ever, but it was for whatever reason. I heard only about half what Bill said. Everybody else.
Thanks for the heads up on that. I'll stay closer to the speaker next time, or the microphone. Cool. All right, let's move on.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Really do appreciate it. Nice work.
And tell Tony congratulations on top 10 public works leader. I'll see him next week in Seaside.
We will. He's been celebrating constantly, as you can imagine.
It's well deserved. It's well deserved.
Good for him.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
great. It's a good, big award.
Yep. Good for Tony.
It's a big deal.
Other business updates, Paul?
Yeah, we got some updates since last time we met in April. It's kind of bidding season in Sisters right now. We have our Rope Street pump station improvements out to bid. All these bids are due in early June. We're basically giving the contractors about a month of bidding time to go through them. Edgerton Transmission Main is out to bid, and Elm Street multi-use path. And then we will have our overlay project out to bid here shortly as well. So with that, trying to see Westside Pump Station. Just need to get the roof on the building. The wet well got sealed and tested last week. Pumping equipment is going to be going in the next couple weeks, and we're still looking for an early to mid-June startup, and then we'll be ready to roll with Rope Street right after that. Camp Polk multi-use path, we have a pre-con tomorrow. That contractor's ready to go. I've been working with the property owner on fencing and utility issues. So you're going to see some activity out there, and that shouldn't take too long for that to get wrapped up. Our transportation SCC update will be going back to council in June for final approval of the resolution. And then depending on, the feedback and what council decides to do, it could be implemented as soon as July 1st. And then, of course, Gateway Park. We got the parking completed on West Cascade, so that added 23 spots as well as 3 ADA spots, including the 6 parking spots that are reserved for future EV chargers. So we have all the infrastructure there, the conduit, the vaults, so really just ready for ODOT to come in and design and fund that project.
You also got the dog park.
I'll let Jackson fill you in on the dog park.
Yeah, as you've seen, fencing is in place for the dog park. Just have to go in with the amenities, so water fountain, dog bowl fountain at the bottom, dog waste station, do's and do not. The things that make up.
And then Adams Avenue, I'm sure you've seen that cloud of dust over there. This isn't only a streetscape project, it's an infrastructure project. So we're doing a lot of work underground, a whole new stormwater system, new utility lines, not only for our streetlight grid and irrigation, but also for CEC to be able in the future to get rid of overhead power in that corridor. So all that work is happening now, and then once they get everything, all the vaults in, and if you go down there, there's concrete structures, precast structures everywhere. All that's going to go in the ground, and then we'll be starting to stack base rock and get some concrete going. So it's construction season, and the property owners and business owners are being very, very good to work with. But they're going to get tired pretty quick. So it's just kind of the reality of having your street completely redone. So
What's the estimated completion date on that?
final completion date, we're looking at September 30th. So it'll go quick, except for the people that have to live there. Yeah. Yep. But we've, the contractor's been good about watering the corridor, where they're working every day, trying to, get as much dirt work done and watered before the weekend as possible. So just try to minimize that dust cloud. It's inevitable here in the spring. That's all I had.
That's all.
That's all, yeah. Next month's report's
many
gonna
good
be who
things.
won what bid and why we're short money, so.
It'll really depend on Edgington, but maybe July. Be more, bring some visual construction updates to you guys, but
Great.
some cool pictures. And, yeah.
Like pictures.
We're geeks, we love that.
Yep.
Thanks, Paul.
You bet.
Sarah, anything?
I don't think anything specific to share.
Good.
There's a lot of topics right now.
There's a lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff going on. But, yeah, if there's anything specific, I'm always happy to answer questions. We're meeting with the fire board tomorrow night, so, that's cool.
Oh, that's right.
I was delayed a little bit, but I got a tour of downtown last week with Jeff Fuller, the fire marshal, and that was really interesting. And I had him to myself, so I got to ask a lot of questions. Yeah, really enjoyed that. See what comes out of the next few weeks in fire.
Laura,
No?
is there anything else to add? John, you got anything?
I do not.
Thank you for showing up, John. We appreciate it.
Yeah, bummed I wasn't there in person. It was close. Just not this time. Next time.
And with that being said, meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.